Introduction. The following pages contain two separate works on the subject of the Antichrist and the second coming of Jesus Christ. The first is that of the church father Irenæus, AD 120 through 202. The second is the work of his disciple Hippolytus, AD 170 through 236. For both of these works, I have used the century-old English translation one can find in the Ante-Nicene Fathers, edited by Alexander Roberts and James Donaldson. The works of these two men should not be, as they have been, casually dismissed as the irrelevant rambling of the primitive mind. It is true they contain statements that seem unsophisticated to our way of thinking. Yet many of these apparently unsophisticated statements are extremely precise and to the point. They were made by men who had a fairly accurate understanding of the prophetic message of the Old Testament. We do not understand what they wrote today simply because we are victims of the working of Satan, whereby he successfully led the church astray from the apostolic tradition, what I call the teaching, and into a theology based on Greek philosophical concepts. While that philosophically based theology was able to preserve the basic doctrines of Christianity, the apostolic teaching can be fully understood and communicated accurately only by thinking and speaking in terms of the parabolic imagery in which it was originally given by the Old Testament prophets. I have already begun to restore the parabolic basis for the teaching in the volumes of the Resurrection Theology series. Those of you who are familiar with what I have presented there can better appreciate what these men have written. The absolute agreement between Irenæus and Hippolytus that there is but one accurate understanding of the Scriptures provides an automatic indictment of anyone who challenges what they have written. Moreover, anyone who rejects their understanding has also done little more than confess an obvious ignorance of second-century Christianity in general and the work of Irenæus in particular. Such a person must carry the label heretic simply because the early church father Irenæus defined that term in his monumental second-century work Against Heresies. The very basis of Irenæus's 5-volume Against Heresies is that the leaders of the church knew but one oral tradition, and that oral tradition had been delivered to them by the apostles. He vehemently argued that anyone who disagreed with the oral tradition of the church was, by definition, a heretic. So anyone today who contends he was wrong in what he has written has thereby sided with the Gnostics and other second-century heretical sects in denying that Christian theology had any essential content to begin with. What does that make those who disagree with Irenæus? Heretics, all. Irenæus was a disciple of Polycarp, who had been a disciple of the Apostle John. Both he and Polycarp believed they had been accurately taught the apostolic tradition. Irenæus wrote this of his teacher Polycarp, Against Heresies, Book 3, Chapter 4. But Polycarp also was not only instructed by apostles and conversed with many who had seen Christ, but was also, by apostles in Asia, appointed bishop of the church in Smyrna, whom I also saw in my early youth. For he tarried on earth a very long time, and when a very old man, gloriously and most nobly suffering martyrdom, departed this life, always taught the things which he had learned from the apostles, and which the church has handed down, and which alone are true. Finally, Hippolytus, the author of the other work I have included, was a disciple of Irenæus. You will find in his works that he too believed he had been accurately taught those things the apostles received from Jesus Christ by revelation. The writings of Irenæus and Hippolytus disclose they clearly believed their obligation as disciples and teachers in the church was first to master the apostolic teaching and then to transmit it unchanged to a subsequent generation. They appear to have succeeded quite well in that endeavor. How then did the church lose the teaching? I have explained generally how that happened in The Way, the Truth, the Life. and for several years now, I have been explaining specifics in the pages of the Voice of Elijah update. I plan to explain even more in future volumes of the mystery of Scripture. Irenæus and Hippolytus agree on all the basic points regarding the advent of Christ and the Antichrist. Although Hippolytus provides somewhat more detail, the beliefs these two held in common can be briefly summarized as follows. Number 1. Satan will appear as a man in the person of the Antichrist because he seeks to reign as king over mankind and desires to focus the worship of God on himself. Number 2. The Antichrist will be a Jew and will achieve his stated objectives by being accepted as the Christ, the Messianic King of the Jews, taking his seat in the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem, pretending to be God himself, and thereby becoming the abomination of desolation, spoken of by the prophet Daniel and mentioned also by Jesus. Number 3. The Antichrist is the little horn of the fourth beast mentioned in Daniel 7. He will slay 3 of the other horns and reign as an 8th with the remaining 7. Number 4. The Antichrist will achieve his objectives in the middle of the final 7-year period of this age. At that time, he will be proclaimed the Messianic King of the Jews and will take his seat as God in the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. He will reign for 3½ years. Number 5. The Antichrist during his reign will deceive the majority of people living on the earth at the time into believing he is God. However, he will persecute those who refuse to worship him because they are able to see through his delusion. Number 6. Jesus Christ will return to earth at the end of the 3½ year reign of the Antichrist, destroying Satan's kingdom. The resurrection of the just will occur at that time. Perhaps the most significant thing about the understanding that Irenæus and Hippolytus had concerning the advent of Jesus Christ and that of the Antichrist is the absolute conviction that what they believed was true. Their conviction came from the knowledge that they had received an accurate explanation of the apostles' understanding of the message of Scripture, which had been handed down by the apostle John to Polycarp. That provided them a much more solid basis for their beliefs than the rambling speculation one finds in current books on biblical prophecy. Therefore, perhaps you should seriously consider the basis for your own beliefs rather than hastily discarding the sources you find assembled here. If you do otherwise, you may well find yourself lacking crucial information at that most important time. But no matter what you do as an individual, the righteous will be ready when Jesus Christ returns. As Jesus said, wisdom is vindicated by her deeds.